Okay, so now what I'm doing is transferring the major elements of this picture using a light board. I can't see the sketches. I can't see all the notations and stuff that I just made, but I can mostly see things, right? This drawing isn't structural. It's about blocking in the values, right? So I don't need to think about the three-dimensionality of these trees. I just need to think about their position. Okay, here's the road. And then I know that I need to preserve this big, these big masses of clouds. I can extend my view. Okay. And I'm going to put a big tree right in the foreground like that. Okay, now I'm gonna keep, I'm staying loose here because we're just trying to block in values, right? We're just trying to block things in. So the majority of this will be done with the brush. Right, but I still want that same sense, and it can be really expressive, really loose, right? This mid-tone, this is a middle dark tone kind of weaving its way through here. I know that these are going to be black. I'll put this up here for my little guide. And get a tack. I think honestly, the looser it becomes, the better. Like here's my path. It's already more exciting, right? It's like it's entering that point where it's something real that I see on my run. I don't want this big. I'm imagining this big tree, but I don't want it to block the curve of the path because I really like that. So I think I'll put that big tree right over here. Cool. So all this stuff, this is kind of what I mean about, not letting yourself be limited to pencil. I like to think about pencil only as structure. And I also... also the pencil gets in the way, so I like to erase it. Keep it light and know that there is a second phase to this drawing that is way more important. Okay, so I'm gonna try to. So I have my little map of my dark tones, my tones that I want to be absolutely black, and we have kind of two options. We know that we have waterproof ink, right? So we could lay down the absolute black stuff first and then let that dry and then lay down the washes. But in this case, I want to kind of be vague. And I like the idea of the absolute black, bleeding in, maybe having like a little bit of a wet technique here. So instead, I'm going to just lay in the midtones. I need another piece of paper here just for scratch paper so I can see how dark my washes are. Okay, so this is pretty So this is pretty good. It's kind of a medium wash. I have brown ink. I'm making my wash out of brown ink. It doesn't matter what color your ink is. You can water down the acetomo and get a really beautiful gray. So now I'm just following this guidance and being, and keeping it expressive too, right? This is gonna drip at one point too. But I have this big massive cloud. It's going off to a vanishing point, but I haven't structured it, right? But I can feel it there. I gotta really control this and keep this light. This is the brightest part of my whole page, so I have to protect that. That is the light breaking through the cloud. That's beautiful. That's what I want to show. I'm getting a little too dark there. Now see how I can see this light value is almost like pink, right? With this ink, and then the dark value. Actually, the color's kind of annoying me, so I might try to add some watercolor to my wash here. Try to dull it out. I'm just looking for gray, but the color is fine. Okay, so controlling it, keeping it light. I have to retain that light. The whole paper is going to be toned except for that spot right there, right? Everything else should have a tone. Now see, we haven't, the structure is minimal compared to the value, right? These natural forms like clouds, like gosh, remember how we worked on creating texture? It only benefits from like just smudging it with the rag or something like that. Okay, so in my mind I have this path become slightly darker. I'm not sure why, right? Like we discussed earlier. I'm trying to control the value and ignore the color. Control the value, ignore the color. So if you're watching this, you probably can see that I'm getting some blue in there. I don't care. But I'm just trying to make sure that matches everything else. Cool, right? All these smudges, it just adds texture. Just looks even better. Okay, so that has to stay white. This has to stay white. Okay. This is doing great, right? And I'm glad I didn't do the black first, because then I would have to be painting around it. I want to have everything feel whole in this, especially the clouds. Okay, now remember in our analysis, the trees had a little line under them, right? They had a little pool of shadow. So we're rendering that same pool of shadow. We're going to place the trees there. We're going to use that same color for the path. That same value, right? There's no black. There's nothing here, just value. Okay. The brownish color and the bluish color are a little bit too close in value. They're too light. So I need to darken that just a little bit, and then do whatever I can to make it. I don't want a line. I want this to be natural, right? So it's okay to be sloppy. But even working this way, just blocking things in, you can see that we're already dealing with perspective, right? We're already dealing with like the clouds going to a single point. The trees are going to go to a single point too. Now the clouds are very light right here behind the trees, but not too light. So I've blocked in values for the whole landscape almost. Gosh, this looks cool already, doesn't it? These kind of broken lines in the clouds. So see, the pencil definitely suggests, you have to make little boundaries for yourself. You have to make little reminders like, that has got to stay light. But that's what I mean. In every drawing, you need to take it beyond the pencil, right? That's the key. It has to go past the pencil. Okay, so I think that I want to do a couple things here. First, I want to have some, while it's wet, I want to start bleeding in some blacks so that they feel natural and whole. But I'm also going to let it dry too. Okay. But especially, see those trees? Let's see. So this is a row of trees back here, and that's way in the distance. So those are going to be really blurry. So I'm going to go ahead and try to at least get them in while it's wet, because I want these black tones in the distance to feel at least a little bit different than the trees in the foreground. And there's nothing it's better if it's abstract, the abstraction makes it better. This is exactly the same as your making up that little print of a tree that looks like this. That little print that I saw a lot of, like that little symbol of a tree. That's a lovely approach, but just make it even looser, You know, I mean, the only thing about it was that it was too detailed. Is that it was too precise, right? So I'm just using these strokes because you know, when in this picture, I honestly I couldn't see anything back there. I couldn't see those trees. So the problem with that little symbol, you know, that little upward arrow, is that it's too defined. You know, it's absolutely the problem. So the way to fix it is to wreck it. You know, to have that same idea. Now I'm patient with this. I'm not, you know, because I'm wanting it to bleed. So that's part of it, right? I want it to approach black, but not quite get there for these ones in the distance. And see, I'm able to modulate at every point. I'm able to, you know, really carefully work with my rag and have too much value. Now I'm just thinking about the texture, you know, just the texture of these little branches. Like if I can just show that something small is happening back here. That's all I need to do, right? Something small and angular. That's all I have to do. I just have to, you know, create that feeling. And then the other thing about this is that the base will be darker, right? So everything that happens here, the darkest color has to be at the bottom. I never want it to separate. Right? And remember, my goal isn't... The only goal I have here is that this strip has to be darker than everything else currently on my page, but it cannot be absolute black. If it becomes absolute black, then I won't be able to use those blacks in the foreground because I won't be able to tell the difference. And then my other goal is just to you know, have fun with these expressive textures, because this expressiveness is actually more real than the symbolism. You know, like that's the expressiveness is way more real than that, a lot more real, right? Because we see things expressively, even if we process them mentally, right? Even if we end up with a little mental symbol. Cool. Really cool. And remember, this is not color, it's value, right? All right, so now I have, so I'm going to block in all my values before I get to any of these textures. So the next thing that I'm going to do is put this middle row of trees where I've already kind of planned their shadow, but I feel like they need to, that shadow maybe needs to be a little more distinct. I made it a little bit lower, so it's sort of changing in my imagination. It's okay to have a little line. Yeah, That's kind of cool. All right, so now the shadow then can't be absolute black, because if you look at it, you'll see that, you know, the trees are facing away from the light, but the shadow isn't. That's the same shadow that appears over here, right? Cool. Now, before I move on, I want to start adding some structure to the clouds, or at least experimenting with that, because the trees are going to go over the clouds. So I don't want to have broken stuff that's broken, right? Like I don't want to draw a line, then stop for the tree, then continue it on the other side. So trying to get back that cloud texture. Well, actually for this, I want to say, let's say that my value blocking is all done for the clouds. So for detail, just to separate it, I want to switch to my pen here, right? Now that will help me so I don't ruin that value that I have in place. If I keep working with the brush, that big brush, then I might wreck that value and make it darker by accident. So I'm just using any old ink, because I know that whatever I do with this brush is only going to embellish the value. It's not going to wreck it, right? So all that I'm trying to do is, you know, just like that first day, like get inspiration from those cloud textures, right? And I want to show that, you know, it's not just the dark part, it's the light part as well. Oh my gosh, it's already looking so cool, right? All right, I'm getting excited about this. I can build the value underneath the cloud too with the same textures. And notice, you know, God, this is why anything but a pencil is a little bit out of your control. And that's why it's awesome. You know, like just letting yourself, how does a cloud feel like? Anything but a pencil sort of generates feelings, right? So you know, I don't know, but you know, running and seeing this every day, I really have the feeling of it, you know, sort of just rapidly moving upward. And see, I've actually totally changed the picture at this point. You know, this is not, and now it's completely imaginary. I was drawing this little thing and I made it gigantic, right? So so that's another, you know, this is what we're talking drawing is like, you know, seeing and responding, and then having those things, you know, having your experience become the most important thing, right? So I'm drawing these kind of like weird angelic forms. I don't know what they are, but my lines kind of feel like clouds, right? I'll try to make stuff that's a little more realistic here. But also just that sense of, you know, knowing it'll be real because the values are real. I just smeared this with my hand, but it kind of looks like the light breaking through that I saw. So I'm going to just use that. Yeah. yeah, you're not responsible for realism, you know? You're responsible for expressing your emotion and crossing that threshold, crossing that threshold. Like, we know that whatever happens here, it's going to be a landscape, so instead of drawing things that are cliche, let's just draw how we feel. And there's, gosh, especially with this nib, if you guys happen to buy this is the one that really spreads open when you use it. It's amazing. See, I mean, what am I drawing here? Doesn't look at all like if you were trying to explain clouds to someone, you wouldn't think of this. But because of the light, it absolutely is a cloud, right? Because nothing else could be here. So by blocking it, just imagining, when you see it like raining, I want to do that over here, watch. Having fun with it and let it be out of control. No one can explain what a cloud is. It's all just your experience of it. That's okay too. But this is kind of breaking my value system. So I'm going to deal with it a little. Okay. Oh, God, it's amazing, right? So, in no way am I looking at this stupid black and white printout anymore. I'm just trying to feel cloudy here. Just trying to have a cloudy experience with my pen. Oh my God, that looks so good. Right? Now this part is really important though. See, so I kind of broke a perspective rule because I made like all of this stuff was further away, so this mass shouldn't have been that big. So I got a little bit carried away because if this is way off in the distance like that would be huge thunderhead, right? So I have to then, treat it that way, like make it solid. But the point is to not neglect these edges, because the edges of this piece, like, see how detailed I've gotten here? That doesn't make sense in terms of distance, because when things are further away, you can't see detail. The detail lessens. So it's really critical to maintain our sense of distance, that this part be detailed and this part be undetailed. So I'm going to try to go back into my drawing with some water and just let go of this a little bit. Like, let this smear away and let it lighten, just so I can create the illusion that it's indistinct, right? That's kind of a mess up on my part, but that's why, I also just like doing that. So I don't think, that's what I mean about knowing rules and then just letting them be, right? Just leaving them there, like knowing rules and then making them as simple as possible so that you can use them. And then and then just doing everything by instinct instead. So I can make some corrections, but in a way this is already here. I can't fix it that much, and I don't want to lose my light. So okay, so that's a little better. It's a little bit less distinct. This is very abstract. If you would, maybe you were to show this video to a landscape painter or something like that, and they would kind of be like, "What?" But there's something about drawing where you are exploring these essential visual rules, and then just letting those rules run and realizing that those rules can be applied anywhere. Having control over the rules and letting yourself exist between representation and abstraction is just beautiful. Okay, so there's this shape that I really have to get. See this shape? It's kind of showing that the cloud is going back in space and getting bigger. So instead of being all wild and crazy, I'm going to try to really focus on that shape. Oops, what's wrong with my ink here? Because that shows the cloud getting bigger. And the motion of that line shows the cloud coming towards us in space. Okay, and all of this is darker, right? I have that in there with my value block, that there's this whole passage that's darker, but it didn't quite come across enough. So I'm taking some extra time. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, gosh, go ahead and look at this drawing and say that doesn't look like a cloud, right? A cloud is supposed to be this. That's the schema that we all learn from clouds. No, not that. More like even more like that whipped cream on top. That whipped cream with a flat bottom, that's what we all know from clouds. But, if there's anything that I can teach you, is that what you think you know visually is not right. This is less of a cloud than an actual cloud. And so even though I feel out of my depth, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I feel, just thrilled. I'm finding all these new forms, and they relate not only to what I can see in my picture, but they relate to how I feel when I'm here. So who's to say? No one can limit what a cloud should be, right? I saw this new kind of cloud, and this is what I saw. Maybe I can, over here, get those puffy ones. But I don't want those. I don't want cliche shapes in my drawing. I don't want those. I want to. I want to make something original. There's a cloud right there. Just looks like it's just suspended, and it's not subject to the dynamics of the other ones. In that same sense. Cool. Yep. That sense of a cloud, of this cloud in the foreground sweeping across these ones way in the background. So all of that is depth. Gosh, I could just do this all day. It's awesome. So all of this is about getting an understanding of rules, getting an understanding of visual rules, just so that you can manipulate them, right? And then also about sort of breaking those rules down and simplifying them in your mind, so that you can implement them when you want, and when you're bored with them you can do something else, right? So you might have heard that thing. It's kind of an art cliche, like, learn the rules so you can break them, but that's not really true. That implies that it's sort of that swanky macho thing that all artists are such rebels and they love breaking rules, but honestly, the rules are tools, and you have to yes, learn the rules, and then you have to translate them into things that are usable for your style, right? And I like dynamic lines. I like being a little messy, and I like just setting up a rule-based support system so that I can draw whatever I want in my own style. So for me, the rules are about sheltering and protecting your style, right? And making sure that, a lot of you, especially in drawing one, you make one mark and you're like, oh, I screwed up, I messed that up, I can't draw. I think I've seen people saying that in chat, like, oh, I can't draw, I've never done it before. But all that we're trying to do is make a place for you, make a place for you to draw. And the first thing about that is discovering what you enjoy, discovering what you enjoy and how you feel, and then learning some rules so that you can support that and protect it, right? This is a beautiful drawing. This is speaking to me about how I feel on my run every day. And I have just enough rules in place so that when someone sees this, they will think that it's clouds. Right? But no way do I have to think about it that way. It kind of feels like clouds. It feels like clouds when I see them. Cool, right? And there's no point in making something cliche. There's no point in showing that stupid cotton candy thing over and over and over, right? Instead, you've had a visual experience, you've sensitized yourself to it, and drawing lets you go back and capture it. Clouds have a big underbelly. I'm not even looking at the picture anymore. Dude, that's cool. But the way that this will hang together, the way that this whole thing hangs together is just because of atmospheric perspective. Because in general, the sky is lighter than everything else. And these horizontal lines in these broad shapes that are horizontal anchor this part and show that gravity applies, whereas up here everything goes every which way, right? So that's the basis of it. And in these marks, like where it's bleeding, where the line is going crazy, that let you sort of freely show your emotion, that matters more than anything, because there's nothing worse than a drawing that's been, a drawing that's so restrained by rules that you don't see the hand of the artist. So finding that balance of structure and expression, of rules as a support for your creativity, instead of rules that you mindlessly follow, that is what matters. That's this whole art form. Okay, I'm going to do another section in a minute here. Okay, back at it. Now, I'm sort of reevaluating these values now that they've dried a little bit, and I can see, especially with my reference here, that see this shadow, see that shadow under the trees? That is not too much darker than this part of the path. So, and then this is just one step lighter. That's just one step lighter. It's not very much lighter. Now when I look at this, here's my shadow under the trees. And this is what I have for the path. This doesn't look right. It looks way too light. It looks more like it's in the range of the sky. So I am going to, and I've also been really liking how so this ink wash here is looking really nice. It always looks darker when it's wet, and you always get another chance to make your little tree shapes. But the point with all of this is not to be too definite, to try to see the shadows instead. Try to see the systems of light in the whole composition instead of drawing anything individually, right? So, because the systems of light are more real and more spatial, right? Like this, doesn't matter that the details on these clouds are really unrealistic. It doesn't matter at all. But it matters that one of the only things that can give you white, pure white, and modulations off of that, one of the only things that's real that can give you that is the sky, right? Doesn't matter what color this is. Doesn't matter how dark it is. We recognize that as sky because of the light. We recognize these as trees because they're a long row, dark, upright things. That's all they need to be, right? So, part of drawing is undrawing. Is unlearning things. Just saying, I want the shape. I want the shape. I don't want to be able to recognize it right away. That's hard. Oops. A little much. It's like withholding gratification, like saying, oh, it's okay. The mistakes are just genius too. That's what makes it when you have a mistake and you can pull it off. See how I kind of broke that curve? That's kind of bad, because that curve is communicating the distance. This kind of paper is so nice you can almost rub all the way through it. Give yourself little goals for every single phase, right? So I just need this whole area to be darker. And I need to have that curve. And there's actually a little stand of trees on this side. Oops. There's a little, so this needs to be darker too. It's just satisfying after a while. You know, it's so satisfying to get away from the structure. You see, even these shapes I'm making with my rag are just like, okay, now I have something more that I like. I want this to have a pretty definite edge, because remember, this does have perspective. Even though we haven't studied it yet, and I haven't constructed anything, everything is going to that point right there. That's where I'm looking. So if I emphasize those lines, just like I did up here with the clouds, even if they're abstract, it'll end up communicating distance. The other thing I care about is the curve of this path. And see, I'm getting it wrong. The curve has to happen up here, right? It has to be high. That is the expansion of the distance, right? So I need to learn that curve, and I need to get that in the values before I move on. Oh my goodness. It's not fun for me if it doesn't get a little out of control. It's more like this boomerang shape. It's very sharp. Cool. Look at that distance, just that very deep sense of distance. And there's my mistake, right? Because I screwed up that structure. I screwed up that structural element, and the biggest thing I want to do is not feel like I'm correcting mistakes. I want to be sort of free to express my experience. So just try to disguise that. Cool. All right, now, so this is all before the blackest black of those foreground trees, right? I'm going to do the same thing. And the whole reason of not doing those trees is because I don't want to be drawing between them afterwards, right? I want to do all that now. Okay, now I'm giving myself more chances, more textural indications, right? Just like with the clouds, I'm just trying to feel somewhat upright and spiky. You know, if I actually draw this perfectly, and in this case I've been using brown ink, so I'm going to use black just so that I can be clear that those things are different. Right. Just thrash that. But all of this, the reason that I just have so much faith in this drawing is because I thought so deeply about the values in the atmospheric perspective before I even started, right? I didn't even need the structure, these are vaguely coming out of the top. It's fine. It doesn't matter. But it's nice to use my strokes to give a sense of just the sensation, right? And if you're really honest with yourself and you're on this walk, then when you look out at those trees, you'll say that same thing. You'll say, like, I can't see those trees. I just have a sensation that they're there. So that's what you're trying to do. Trying to connect your drawing with your sensations, and connect your sensations with reality. But that's harder than you might think. It really is. It's not holding the ink for some reason. Okay, cool. And then it's fine to also let it drop off. Right? Let it... I don't know what's going on with my pen. It's fine to also let those things, drop off. Then all these illusions just happen naturally. Like then this just seems like it's more in the background. Okay, so now my next goal is to develop another texture and also reassert this road now that I really know how to do it. I need to let this dry a little bit because my paper is tearing. So the next texture I'm trying to work on is these scrubby little bushes and how they feel when they get up to the road, right? So now what I'm conscious of is, just like in your pieces when you saw this, that's just a texture, it's just a symbol. It means tree, right? But instead of making it so cognitive, like this could be a symbol for a tree, try to make it just tactile, like a little looser, right? So just the weird scratchiness of this grass, and then the only little rule I'm trying to hold in my mind is, I wanted that curved boundary. But when I start to have distance, that distance needs to show that whatever this texture is, it gets smaller. So it's kind of clumpy. I'm not looking too hard at this because I'm not trying to draw it. Because if I draw it, it will be... if I draw it in a really structural way, it will turn black because of the lines, right? And then that'll ruin my whole reality. So I'm just trying to give a feeling of these clumps, right? It's just like in this, you can't really see these. You just have a feeling of the clumps. If you were to like, fully draw it and it had a ton of lines and there was a little black spiky ball here, it would stick out. You would really notice it. Okay, so I'm getting my feeling for this texture, and I'm trying to just feel excited, hold on to the emotion of it, and then also pay attention to my rules, like just little mini rules. So my stroke is about this long. It needs to get smaller as it goes back. And it has to happen in a controlled way. Cool. All right, so that has been pretty successful. See what I mean? I'm not drawing anything. There's nothing else this could be but grass because of the light. And then here I can't even see it anymore, I'm just letting this fall apart. Making it thicker, just pressing on the pen more. That's another way of showing that it's closer to you. Right? Okay, so I'm super happy with this. I can keep working on it in any number of ways. And by the way, if you're, you have your own style, so maybe, mine is pretty like, swoopy and dramatic and abstract. It doesn't have to be you either. It doesn't have to look at all like mine. You can have whatever cloud forms you want up here. Just make it uniquely yours. If you don't like the bleeding, if this stuff is messy where my sleeve hits it, just let it dry. Just, work on it slowly. This is almost like it's almost like an oil painting method. But gosh, there's just nothing better than feeling the ink on the page. There's just something so simple about it. Oh, that's out of bounds. See? I don't want that to get that light. I mean dark. Cool. But it's okay. Can just sort of make it seem like a shadow or something. Oh, that's kind of a mistake. Okay, it'll be fine. All right, so now the next value that we're going to put in is we're finally going to do what we determined was the darkest part of this whole thing, which was the trees in the foreground. Now everything is relatively dry, so I can kind of just do this without issue. But what's really important for me to do is control the size, right? So see this little strip here? That's pretty small. These aren't much bigger. So I think they go kind of right here. But I don't want them to be too big or they won't make sense. So I'm getting the purest black I can. And then I'm just sort of, drawing these loose forms. Because to be honest, that's all I can see. They need to be rooted into this shadow somehow. Just, you don't have to draw that boxy trunk. Just, let it shimmer. Let it shimmer. Let it just fall apart. You don't have to know what this form is. You just have to know where it is and how dark it is. It's all the way dark and it's right there. Okay, and then as it dries, it'll get lighter. So you have to avoid that. And then some of this linear stuff can help us show distance, especially if we can do a line that gets thicker. So that, especially on the path, we can do that same thing. Just emphasizing those lines because they're sort of pointing into that distance. This is our little grove of trees. You can make this as detailed as you want, but whatever you do with your detail, keep it the same color, If you're doing clouds and they're all meant to be light, it shouldn't end up black like this tree. Let's say that this one is a little bigger because it's a little closer. God, that's cool. It looks so cool. And then finally, I'm deciding. I want it more abstract. I think it's like more believable. And then I'm finally deciding that I want a larger one here. Cool. Maybe we keep embellishing this. Okay, so alright, so I think that is enough to give you the idea. But remember, you have your own style, and however you address this with whatever materials you do it is completely welcome. You don't have to be like, this is very heavy and swirly, and maybe that doesn't appeal to you, and that's fine. But it's all about sort of identifying shapes, creating textures, and blocking in value before you start working. This needs a lot more texture. Being able to look at a landscape and say, and divide it into values, right? Just in the most basic way, we're saying, oh gosh, I can't stop working on this. I love it. So just in the most basic way, we're saying the sky is really light, right? It doesn't have to be a color, but it has to be lighter than everything else. The ground is medium, and the trees are black, right? And the example that we saw in this drawing is creating those values and then not really bothering to draw anything, like just sort of getting into the emotions of the textures and the expressive capacity of what we're doing, and not really thinking too hard about it, and showing how much we can do to make a world that looks real, a world that looks spatial, but it's really loose and unstructured. The biggest structuring element is just the light falling all over this drawing, and it looks beautiful. It looks wild, it looks better than it looks a lot better than this iPhone photograph, I'll tell you that. But you can address this in your own way. Just take a walk, take a picture, try to look for differences in sunlight, and then block in your values, and then render the details in any way that you want, with brush and ink, or with pen. If you want a neater look, just let it dry. Don't work on it while it's wet. Just let individual parts dry. But I like abstract work. Gosh, really pretty. All right, so that's it. I hope that you like that, and I hope that this is something that you carry with you into every drawing. Like in every single drawing, if you're drawing like a vase of flowers and you're able to block in and plot the values before you start, that will help you in any media, in charcoal, in anything, right? If you're able to find a way to make decisions about the values, you're off to a really good start.